Hi, this is Dr. Bosch, and I thought I would run through that first lab since I've already had some questions on it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that everything you need to do for our labs are on the lab guide. So the lab guide is in the week 1 module, the very first one. It's called Lab Guide 1. And as you can see, there are actually 3 endocrine labs in this lab guide. So the lab guide can have 1 lab, 2 lab, 3 labs that are kind of similar. In this case, these are our endocrine labs. So you get the lab guide from the week 1 module, and as you can see, right at the top, I've put the homework. I don't usually do that, put it up here, but just to remind you that you'll be doing lab 27, completing everything in that lab. And then in the last pages of the lab, you'll see questions, and they have to be done. So those are on pages 406 to 408, questions 1 through 15. You have to fill those out. You'll be taking a picture of those and including them when you submit this lab. Then for the second lab, the Physioli X lab, same thing. You'll do the lab, and then there's questions at the end. Now the Physioli X labs are way in the back of the lab book, and it's kind of these blue lined pages. So they have their own numbering system. So they're numbered with a PE in front. So from pages PEX 71 and 72, that's where you'll do those questions. And then the fetal pig lab, also in the lab manual, there's a dissection section. It uses the regular numbers though. And at the end, it's just one page, page 718, has questions 1 through 5. So these questions, when you're done with this lab, and this lab, you do have to complete these questions, and then you'll be taking a picture of those and submitting them as a PDF. So what you'll submit will be all the pages of the lab guide with all your answers, and then these questions, and these questions. So it can be a fairly large document. You take pictures of those, you make sure that they're upright, that they're in focus, and they're in order, and then you make a PDF of that, and then submit that to the submit box where it says Lab Guide 1. If you haven't done that sort of thing before, which is pretty common in online classes, in the announcements section, I give you a number of ways of producing a PDF from your lab guide and lab work. Okay, let's look at our first lab. You're going to start out, basically it's mostly a histology lab. That is, you're looking at the tissues of the endocrine system, the endocrine glands. And you start out with some questions. And you actually have to read in your lab manual. It'll actually give you some pages to work from. And what these questions do is kind of give you a preview of what you'll be doing in the lab, and just ask you questions that'll help remind you of various ideas related to the endocrine system. You can learn this from your lecture material. This is in the lecture material, and of course it's in the lab material. So this is all found in the lab manual. You can answer these all using the lab manual. So it gives you some pages to go through, some questions to answer. Don't skip any of those. Answer them as best you can. And if you do all the pre-lab questions, then you will be ready for the lab. That's why I have the pre-lab questions. It kind of goes through the kinds of things you have to know to do well in the lab itself. All right, and then you're going to be actually looking at a number of endocrine glands. And the slides you'll be looking at, pictures of slides really, are also in the week 1 module. So just look for the lab 27 slides in the week 1 module, and you're going to draw those and then use your lab manual to label them. So when you draw a thyroid gland, you'll be drawing follicles, and you'll just write the word follicle and then put a line down to the follicle. And then the follicular cells, which are different, those are the cells around the follicle. Again, you'll write follicular cells, then a straight line to the follicular cells. So you do have to write these labels down and then always use a straight line to where you're going. Don't do like a weird circle or something. It's just the professional way of doing this is a straight line. And then the parafollicular cells and areas between the follicles. So you'll use these slides, the picture of the slides, to draw them, and then your lab manual actually shows you what things are so you can label them. I don't give any credit for drawings without labels because the only way I know that you're actually seeing what you need to see is with the labeling. So draw it as best as you can. You don't have to be a great artist, but you draw it as best as you can and then label them for full credit. Now in this lab there are some questions related to that, since these are glands and they produce hormones. So right away I wanted to ask you kind of what hormones are produced by the follicular cells and what hormones come from the parafollicular cells. So be sure to answer these questions underneath as well. Now these happen to be numbers that are close together. Sometimes the numbers are all over. These are the actual slide numbers were you to take this class in the classroom. And they're pretty easy this time. It goes 2, 3, and here's 4 and 5. There's not the exact order, but again, draw them as well as you can in color. So the color has to match the actual slides. So be sure to get yourself some colored pencils or something like that, so that what I look at here looks like the slide, both in color, shape, and then of course labeling it. And don't forget to answer these. Sometimes students skip these and lose some points there. Then when you're done with that, and that's probably the hardest part, to draw these like this, but it's definitely doable and you get better and better at as the semester progresses. Then it says to familiarize with the location of the endocrine glands. Now you might say, I'll just sign that, but really if you take the time to do what you're supposed to do in these labs, you'll find that you're very successful in this class. If you skip over a lot of things, you'll be less successful, because these kinds of activities are the same ones that I'll be testing you on the practical. Plus, there's such overlap between the lab and lecture. If you do a nice job in lab and learn this material in lab, you're learning the same material that's in the lecture. So you will overall do quite well in the class. So you're learning the locations and then you put your initials there. But don't skip you might say, well, that's silly. But yeah, go ahead and initial it, even though that sounds silly. Then this is called a group challenge, but you're maybe on your own unless you have contact with other students. And you're putting an odd hormone and then the reason for the choice. There's like 4 hormones. And you remember Sesame Street where they said one of these things is not like the other? So you have to put the odd hormone. Maybe it's made in a different place, or it has a completely different function, or something else that's odd about it. And as long as you give a good reason for your choice, you'll get the credit for that. But the reason is almost more important than your choice. I want to hear why you think it's the odd one out. Then remember, at the end of the lab are those 15 questions. Be sure you do those, you take a picture of them, and those will be included in your submission. You're only submitting one PDF. It's too hard for me to open more than one object in the or file in the submission box. So that's why you have to make one PDF that has all of these pages and then the pages from the lab manual. Okay. Now the next lab, the Physioli X1, is in the back of your lab manual. It says in the blue line pages, but you need to have the access code to modified mastering A and P to do this lab. And you're going to have a lot of labs like this. And that's why that's one of the 3 requirements, is to get access to modified mastering. Now, if you have the package, it has all that. The package has the e-text, it's got the lab manual, and it's got the access code. And so let's take a look. So actually, let's see how we go on there. Maybe I'll switch to another screen real quick here. So when you go into modified mastering, you'll see these same numbers depending on which access code you get. These are on the home page of Canvas. I'll just use this one, or I'll just use the first one. So you click on it, and then what we'll be using for the labs is what's called the study area. Okay, so I'll show you how to get on there. So you just click on the class, whichever one you happen to have, and then you click on study area, and you then launch the study area, so kind of clicking twice. And then these are where our labs are. We're mostly using this PAL, that's for the fetal pig, and the Physioli X, that is for the one we're looking at now. So if you click on Physioli X and hit exercises, we're actually just doing one activity in this lab. So it's exercise 4, number 1. We're only doing that one. And you click on this, and then to actually do the lab, you have to answer questions or look at things, say next, just work your way through. So this will both be in your lab manual with directions, and it'll be in front of you. And you just go through it and then answer the questions. If we go back, let's go back to launch the study area. For the third lab, you go to this PAL right here, and then, so it's Practice Anatomy Lab 3.1. You have to kind of hit it twice. And we're using the fetal pig. And we're doing the endocrine system. So I hit fetal pig, and I hit endocrine system. And there's all these pictures. And so what you'll see is you can see the labels and see what things are related to the endocrine system. And then you can hide them, so you can kind of look at it. So what I do for the practical is actually take a picture of this, something like that, except you don't see the answer. And I'll ask you, okay, what gland is that? So you have to go through each of these and learn the various parts. And the nice thing about this program is it kind of lights things up, so it's just easier to see them. There's the thymus, there's the thyroid, here's some more of the thymus. There's 2 parts to it. And just keep going, look at all these. And let's see, show the labels. There's the pancreas. It's very, very good pictures, and hopefully that will be helpful. Okay, so back to the lab. You want to read all of this. So this tells you about basal metabolic rate, the glands that are important, about the rat's weight and converting to kilograms. You don't want to skip anything. Most of the time when I get questions on the lab, students have just skipped over stuff. It looks like it's too much. But basically, with the Physioli X labs, you're going to have a pre-lab prediction question. So for example, you have a normal rat. If you take out the thyroid that controls metabolism, will the basal metabolic rate go up or down? And hopefully you'd say down because it no longer has a thyroid. And then this rat, which has lost its pituitary, it no longer has the stimulating hormone, the TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. So hopefully you would think that the metabolic rate would drop there too. So you just have to have kind of a background to be able to answer these questions. And then so you do these pre-lab prediction questions first. And then here's another one, a pre-lab question. And so you have to kind of know what thyroxine does, what this does. Then the PCH, that's kind of an inhibitor. What will happen then? So kind of learn about this. Then when you, and make sure you fill them out. When it says why, you have to write why. If you leave that blank, you don't get any points. And then when you're done with this, you're really going to know well what to expect in this lab. And then it's just a matter of doing the lab, making a conversion from grams to kilograms, because metabolic rate is measured in kilograms for everybody. And then making these conversions. Some will be done on the computer. It'd be nice to have your calculator nearby to help with that as well. And so you're basically just filling out this chart. You don't have to send in the lab that you do, because all your answers will actually be on this page. So just fill this out as you go. There's a few activity questions. They're the same questions that are in the lab manual. So use that to answer these questions when you're done with the lab. Here's a picture of what's going on in this lab. And then there are those questions 1 through 13 at the end of the lab. For the last lab, I already showed you where that was. And you're basically just looking for these different structures. And then checking them off when you see them. And then there's a quiz in the lab to do at the end. You want to do that and then again sign it. Now at the end, make sure you take a picture of all pages and make a PDF. I do hope this was helpful. Again, contact me if you have any questions.